Welcome to the CEO Spot. I'm your host, Amy Walker, and today we are talking about how to say no politely in business and other success habits that are going to help you be able to grow your business. And our guest today is Brian Benson. We've got some great info for you. So if you need to know some success habits to create more influence and impact in your business, then this is the place to be. Brian, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you on the CEO Spot.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Brian and I just discovered that we went to high school about 20 miles from each other, and we are both Oregonians, although I was a temporary transplant. I was only there during my last couple of years of high school, but fun stuff.
I won't hold that against you. Yeah, hey, you live there.
Awesome. I did. Awesome. Well, Brian, before we jump into the principles from your book, which, by the way, this came in the mail and I was like, I got a Christmas present from someone. And then I looked at it closer. I was like, oh, I'm so excited to read this book. So I've been looking through. You've got great tips in here. We're going to definitely let you share some of that. Before we jump into that, though, I'd love to just give your official introduction. So Brian Benson is an award-winning #1 best-selling self-improvement and children's book author. He's an actor, he's a filmmaker, he's a coach, and a TEDx speaker. And he is also a 4-time Ironman triathlete and cross-country bicyclist, which I very much am in awe of because I operate under the philosophy of I want to be able to run just enough to get away from anything chasing me, but I'm not really a runner. So he definitely knows the value of hard work and never giving up on his dreams. And the messages that he shares with audiences are really to help them be able to live their best life, to give them inspired ideas to help them soar. So his book, which is Habits for Success, is a #1 Amazon bestseller. And I'm excited to dive in and talk a little bit more about it today. So it's going to be a fun show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about how did you come up with the idea for the book and get started moving in this direction?
Well, I think it's kind of a culmination of the last 10 years of my life. 10 years ago, I stepped into the unknown. I left my family business because I felt like I kind of was done growing there. And I kind of felt like I had this gift inside of me that wanted to come out, although I had no idea what it was. And sorry, little phone call coming in through there.
We'll edit it. No problem.
Yeah, so it was just a culmination of the last 10 years of my life. After I just took this leap into the unknown, kind of trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. And I accidentally wrote my first book way back in 2009. It's a book on a whole bunch of different ways to stay in life balance. And that just kind of pointed me in this direction. So after I was one of those kids when I was little that always asked my mom why. She just reminded me that Brian, just said why all the time. And so I've kind of brought this inquisitive child with me into adulthood. And as I went through this journey the last 10 years of kind of just being opened up to a whole lot of new things that I really had no idea were inside of me, I also kind of paid attention and monitored my own self-growth journey. And so I wanted to write this book on things that worked for me, things that I felt were important. And we're all very similar. We all have a lot in common. And, that's why I wrote Habits for Success, to help,
Awesome.
Try to empower other people to become more self-aware.
Well, this is interesting because I feel like a big part of my journey right now is kind of reclaiming how I create success. So I know how to create success. I know how to create results, but I am learning how to create success and results in a way that's really good for me all the time versus the standard American busyness and the overscheduling and the overcommitment and the success at the price of us. And so I was really excited to come across your book and to get to meet you. And one of the chapters that I wanted to talk a little bit about is chapter 18, which is just say no. And I've had this saying for a long time that what you say no to is as important as what you say yes to, because every yes has a no behind it. So if I say yes to this opportunity, I'm saying no to something else. And am I really being intentional about that? So I'd love to talk a little bit about saying no and being able, in business, you can't just say no. You have to say no in a way that's polite, that still maintains the relationship, that keeps doors open, but still says no.
Absolutely. And that was well said. For me, my mom was a bit of a people pleaser, and I picked that up from her too. And so through the years, I would say yes a lot. And, most of the time it wasn't a big deal. But as I got older and as I got more focused on what I wanted to do, it started to become a big deal. And so it was hard initially. But ultimately, I just had to honor what it was that I wanted to do and how I wanted to be in the world. And so I started saying no, and some people didn't like it at first because I probably had trained them wrong. But you have to do that if you really want to get to where you want to go, and if you really want to do the things that you want to do and to share with the world. So, for me, it was a little bumpy at first, and it's still not completely easy, but it's getting much, much easier, and I'm hyper aware of it, because with all the different things that I'm trying to do, I only have so much time and so much bandwidth to do what I do. And because I need a lot of time to refill my cup and re-energize and get outside and do the things that actually kind of help me become more creative. And so, it's definitely a very, very important part of being successful. And just
when I first started, yeah, absolutely. Because, if you say yes to the wrong things, you do not have time for the right things. So one of the things that I did when I was very first starting to make this transition was I started just giving myself a pause. And so when someone would ask me for something or to do something and a new opportunity came, I just trained myself to say, thank you so much for thinking about me. Let me look this over, see what I've got on my plate, and I'll get back to you today and let you know one way or another. And it would give me this space to just analyze and check in and say, is this right for me? If I say yes to this, am I still going to have time for my children, time with my husband, time to do the things that I want to do? Is it going to create the highest priority of growth for me? Mm-hmm. Or am I just saying no am I just saying yes because I feel bad saying no? It's a good space to pause.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I just call it running it through my heart filter, because I feel like I'm pretty intuitive about myself and what it is that I need to do and should do. And so that's great advice. And I kind of do the same thing as well. I just let it sit there for a little bit and let it kind of run through and let me get those feelings that I'm accustomed to feeling when I know it's something I should do or maybe should just pass on. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to touch on a couple other of the principles from the book as well. This one, chapter 6, as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, yeah, that strikes a chord for me. So it's okay to fail. I am a person I was the girl in high school who had all the ribbons and all the achievements. And, when I graduated, there was like so many extra things. Like, I like to win. And I don't know that that's a lesson that I've mastered yet. Tell us a little bit about that. It's okay to fail.
Well, I agree with you. I've had some things, I wouldn't say come easy to me, but I've worked very hard for them. But yet it seems like I too have maybe had my share of accomplishments. And, that perfection thing is a really tough thing to work with. And I still struggle with a little bit, but I've learned that some of my expectations, like whenever I feel like I have an idea where things are headed. When I was 3, I told my mom I was put here to inspire people. And so this last 10 years, as I've been releasing books and different projects and short films and videos, what have you, I kind of in the back of my mind would say, is this the thing that's going to get me out there a little bit further? Instead of just really, I mean, I took pride in what I did, but instead of really just enjoying the moment and celebrating that win and letting it kind of do what it's supposed to do and just trust in the process. So I guess what I'm saying is a few times when things that I thought might have done a little bit better than they did initially, my expectations were in such a place that I became depressed after that, and I wasn't enjoying the ride. And so, you know, as far as being, it's okay to fail, it is. I mean, we learn so much from failure. You know, sometimes we learn that it's something that we don't want to do, or we learn a better way to do it next time, or we just needed a little more seasoning. You know, it's just a matter of trusting in your process and really check in to make sure that you're doing something that you want to do. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
for the right reasons too. I mean, why are you doing this? Why do you have such high expectations for it? Is it to fill that void of maybe lack of self-acceptance or something, which I've definitely gone through myself. So there's a lot of different parts that we want to become aware of why we are the way we are with some of our projects and successes and failures.
Mm-hmm. Well, you touched on something that I think is so real and valid, which is that if you don't give yourself permission to fail and you're not okay with failing, you rob yourself of the joy of creating, because not everything you create wins.
Right.
And, it just doesn't. Not every video hits it out of the park. Not every book is a bestseller. Not every program sells $1 million. We just lose sight of the joy of creation. I read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert a couple of years ago. One of my clients sent it to me. And in that book, she talks about just allowing yourself to create just for the sake of creating things that you love. And it
Yeah.
was so freeing to me to go, okay, so all these ideas swimming around in my heart and my soul, I can make them just because I love to do it. And it doesn't matter if people buy it or not. That's awesome. It's so freeing to be able to come to that understanding.
It is, and it's something I'm still working on a little bit, because I think as we climb the ladder maybe a little bit in what we're doing, we see not that there's a finish line, but yet in our mind maybe there's this finish line. I know for me personally, I've tried to control things a little bit more as I've gotten closer, which has done the opposite for me. You know what I mean? It's made it less fun. And I just need to just go out and share and just connect and just really enjoy the ride. It's funny, when I started writing the self-help books 10 years ago, I'm a pretty fun, witty guy, and I started to put all this pressure on myself to become like perfect and almost pious, and it messed me
Right.
up. And I'm really right now just trying to get back to who I was and still do what I'm doing, but yet in a more joyful, fun way. So
Yeah.
uh,
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I was just thinking about this morning, actually. I have a book. I always have probably 5 books in my brain at a time, and you kind of pick them up and play with them a little bit here and there. But I have a book that I mapped out a couple years ago that is all about, reconnecting with the little girl inside of you. That I think as women, sometimes we get so serious and so have to take care of everybody and have to manage all the things so fast and so early. Like, we're in such a hurry to grow up
yeah,
that we lose sight of that little girl that runs and plays and laughs and dreams and doesn't have to get anything done and doesn't have a timeline. And so, that book came back into my mind this week, and I had that thought of like, well, if I were to read that right now, I'm not living it, like,
right,
but
right.
it doesn't mean that I'm not on the journey of rediscovering it. And sometimes I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have it all figured out, when in reality, I think a lot of figuring it out is just knowing that we don't have it all figured out, and like it's a work in progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anymore, yeah, of course I want my stuff to get out there to try to hopefully help people, help people, but yet I just want to have fun while I'm doing it, and take
Mm-hmm.
that pressure, that self-imposed pressure that I really pile on myself, take that off.
Yeah. I'm a prayerful person, and I was praying the end of last year and feeling just like a weight. And what came to me was, all those deadlines, all that pressure, you made those up. It's not from my higher power. I just made them up. And I was like, oh, so, I'm feeling like, but I'm called to do this work and
Yes.
I've got to make impact and I've got to do all
Yes.
these big things. And it was like, yeah, you made all that up. So if you want to run with that and if it's working for you, go for it. But if not, it's not mine. It's not for me. So
Well
awesome.
said.
Okay. So what are some of your favorite parts of the book? Do you have any highlights that you really hope people resonate with?
There's so many. I think, one of them is trying to maintain life balance. I don't think it's an accident that my very first book was a whole bunch of different ways to stay in life balance, because I needed to learn that initially. So as I went forward, because, balance for me is just, is everything. I'm very routine oriented, and it allows me to live proactively, not reactively, and be aware of those times when I do need to take a break and what have you. So maintaining life balance is really, really important. And ultimately, I think it also, balance can be a moving target, but
Mm-hmm.
the more in balance that we can be, the clearer our intuition, source, God, the universe, whatever you'd like to call it, is going to come through, and we can listen to that. And I ultimately feel like that's our game plan right there. And that's all I've been doing these last 10 years, is listening to my intuition, even though it didn't always make sense, and just jump into that and step out of my comfort zone. And one thing
Mm-hmm.
led to another, and all of a sudden I'm doing all these things that I had no idea were inside of me, or terrified me initially, or what have you. So balance is huge for me. I think we'd already talked about it a little bit, but creativity is huge. I think everybody can be creative, and they don't have to be a Van Gogh or a Hemingway. You know what I'm saying? There's different ways that we can be creative, but it's another way to connect with source, with God. And it's a form of meditation too. And I think the more that we can kind of get centered and be creative, the happier that we'll be. And we have something to share with other people too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I love so much of what you're talking about here. And I feel like this is kind of evidence is showing up for me in my life of the truths of all these principles. So this was such good timing because
Mm.
at the end of 2018, I was tired and I just felt like I didn't have any other creative ideas. I was like, I worked hard this year. So I took most of the month of December off. And I'm not even joking. January 1st, I had my brain was so full of excitement and so full of passion and so full of ideas. And that first couple days of the new year, I got so much done. Why? Because I was rested, because I was balanced, because I wasn't pushing myself to produce even when I had nothing left to give. Like
Yeah.
that time to recharge and really honor the way that we create. That is honestly, that's my goal for this whole year, is to be able to create success, but with better habits. So that's why when your book arrived in the mail, my son brought it to me and I was reading through it. I was like, this is perfect timing. So thank you for
Oh,
sending this.
well, thank
And
you. They're for me too.
yeah, that's always the way it goes, right? Like the inspiration we receive is for us and for others. So,
Yep.
all right, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and I know we got to wrap up here. If you could give your new entrepreneur self any advice based on what you've learned, what would that advice be?
Wow. A couple of things. One, just to trust in the process. And even though sometimes I'll beat myself up for maybe feeling like I should be further along than I am, but looking back and really identifying everything, it's all perfect. I need to do what I did and go through the things that I did, just to become more seasoned, to develop an empathy for others when I'm, communicating and speaking with, just to have a shared experiences, and also just to really solidify my foundation. So just don't try to rush things, because it never really works. We end up spending too much money on something you didn't need to spend it on, maybe in the marketing realm or what have you, or you just, I don't know, you beat yourself up. So trust the process. And uh, I think we're all here to learn and grow, but the ultimate thing that we're here to do, I think, is to really learn how to love and accept ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so the more that you can do that, I think, love yourself and everything falls into place, is what I truly believe. And so, I've had to work on that just like everybody else. But I would say just trust the process and really learn how to trust and honor yourself. And there's so many different ways we can do it. You can say no, like we talked about at the start of the show. You can go for a hike when you're feeling, your brain's full and you need a rest and refill. I mean, there's just so many things. You can be less judgmental or take some of the pressure off of ourselves. So those are really big for me.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I'm so glad we got a chance to do this show.
Yeah,
A lot of times we're very business process focused. And while that's all super important, what we're talking about here is what makes it so you can be happy while you do it all. So great
yes.
conversation.
I mean, why else do something, right?
Absolutely. So if our listeners and our viewers want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
My website's gbrianbenson.com. It's Brian with an I, and everything's on there, the books, the films, you name it. And if they want to learn more about the book, Habits for Success, they can go to habitsforsuccessbook.com.
Awesome. Okay, good stuff. So we appreciate your time in being here and sharing with our audience. Those of you who are watching, here's your job now. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you're learning, what your takeaways are. Make sure you like the video, share the video with anyone in your network that you think needs to have this conversation. And of course, subscribe to the channel because we are bringing you great business interviews twice a week. Plus I give you content on the other days. So it's a really great resource for you. If you haven't yet, make sure that you come over to the CEO Spot, our private Facebook community, where you can continue the conversation, ask questions, connect with other entrepreneurs who are in your same shoes, trying to grow their business and love the journey. So thank you everyone so much for being on. Brian, we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amy.